The 2002 World Cup was held in Japan and South Korea, and this was crazy. 51 African countries entered the qualification process for 5 spots. Remember, remember that it was one team just 50 years ago, 50 years before this, right? And 3, and then 7, then 17. Now 51. Virtually every country on the continent enters these qualifiers. It's insane. And in fact, for the 5 qualifiers, though, sort of starting to show the dominance of certain teams. 4 of the 5 teams that made it to the 98 World Cup, South Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Tunisia qualified again. The only new team was the Lions of Teranga, Senegal, right? That qualified for the first time. So they came in place of Morocco. They qualified in place of Morocco. So, like Cameroon 12 years earlier, remember Cameroon had done this against Argentina. Senegal started the tournament with a shock 1-0 win over the defending champions, France this time, right? You might remember. I also remember this game keenly. I remember getting picked up from school and going straight to the couch to watch this. Papa Bouba Diop, right? The wardrobe, as they called him, may he rest in peace, scores the one goal to defeat France. And remember, France is Senegal's former colonial master, if you will. So this game also has some geopolitical weight to it, right? So after that, after beating France 1-0, they go on to draw with Denmark 1-1, and Denmark go on to win the group. But they draw with Denmark 1-1. Then in their final group match against Uruguay, crazy game, they were leading 3-0 at halftime, Senegal was. Then in the second half, the South Americans, right, Uruguay, gets it together, and they end up drawing 3-3. Crazy match, one of the all-time great World Cup matches. A little bit sloppy in the second half from Senegal. Maybe the nerves got the best of them. But in any case, that was enough for them to qualify to the second round. They knocked out France, right? And also Uruguay, both former World Cup champions, with one of them being the defending champions. So, Senegal qualifies to the second round. And in the second round, they are drawn against Sweden. Right, in the round of 16, they are drawn against Sweden. And Henri Camara scores in the 37th minute. Then Sweden equalizes. Then the match goes into extra time. And Henri Camara comes back up and scores the winning goal. Incredible match. Incredible match, right? So they qualify to the quarterfinals. The second African team since their West African neighbors Cameroon made it. You look at their flags the wrong way, you might even think it's the same country. But in any case, so they qualify, and they ended up meeting up against Turkey, and they ended up getting eliminated by a golden goal 4 minutes into extra time. You all remember the golden goal? This is when, if a team scores, the game ends right then. So, and that's how they had won. That's how Senegal had won in the round of 16 against Senegal. They don't do that anymore. And Turkey did that to them in the quarterfinals. So close, right? Ended up losing due to this golden goal right at the death. So what happened? Of Africa's 5 representatives, right? 3 won at least one game, which is more than the 2 from 98. But only 1 progressed to into the second round and made it to the quarterfinals, which means that that's the 5th time in a row that an African team had made it to the round of 16, and the second time an African country had reached the quarterfinals. This time, as opposed to the first time, to 98, when all 5 teams were coached by Europeans, this time 3 of the 5 teams took a local coach to the World Cup. Jomo Sono in South Africa, Festus Onigbinde in Nigeria, and Amar Suya in Tunisia, right? And also something that stands out in this tournament is El Hadji Diouf. You all remember El Hadji Diouf from Senegal made it into the team of the tournament, right? His post-tournament record, the less said, the better. But he made it into the team of the tournament, and he played very, very well. In fact, between 2000 and 2002, 2003, he was great. I'm surprised that Henry Camara didn't make it into this team, though he had played very well. And I remember that team as much as I remember the Nigerian one earlier that I spoke about. Tony Silva in goal, Daf in defense, Fadiga, Aliou Cisse, who's their coach, who was their coach at the most recent World Cup and has been their coach for a while now. Papa Bouba Diop, El Hadji Diouf, Henry Camara. I think there's a couple of Camaras in that team. So stellar team, really, indeed. Very good showing, and they had matched the best finish ever in the World Cup by an African team by reaching the quarterfinals. Now, unlike 2002, where 4 of the teams had played in the previous World Cup and Senegal was the only debutant, in 2006, 4 out of the 5 teams were debutants to the World Cup, right? Had never played in the World Cup before, right? And that's Ivory Coast, okay, Togo, Angola, Ghana. Can you believe Ghana is making it to the World Cup for the first time here? And South Africa. We'll just talk about a few of the results here. Ivory Coast. Well, before we get to the tournament, something seismic happens, right? As the teams were trying to qualify. On 8 October 2005, Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, played against Sudan in a qualifier. And ultimately, right, as results in other places went their way, they qualify. Cote d'Ivoire qualifies to the World Cup, their first ever World Cup. That's Drogba, that's the Torres, who else would have been on that team? Eboué, right, is that collective, Diabate, and so forth. So they qualify. I think Sheikh Tiote as well may have been on that team. So they qualify to the World Cup. And as they're having a press conference, they're doing a press conference, they begin to celebrate wildly. But it wasn't long before Drogba's attentions, as they celebrate during the press conference, turned to the civil war that had been raging in Cote d'Ivoire since 2002. So speaking after the match at this press conference, Didier Drogba, arguably, he's in the conversation about the greatest African players of all time, right? He's one of the names that comes up consistently there. And he says, in French, "Men and women of the Ivory Coast, from north, south, center, and west, we prove today that all Ivorians can coexist and play together with a shared aim to qualify for the World Cup. We promised you that the celebrations would unite the people. Today we beg you on our knees." And as he said that, the players fell onto their knees. "The one country in Africa with so many riches must not descend into war. Please lay down your weapons and hold elections." And he finished. Now remember, Drogba is not even the captain at this point, right? But he took it to themselves. Then the players started to sing, "We want to have fun, so stop firing your guns." Now these words had like significant effect, eventually helping the two warring sides to the negotiating table where a ceasefire was signed. And that wasn't the end of it. The year after the World Cup, while touring the rebel held north of the Ivory Coast, Drogba announced the national team's match against Madagascar on June 2007 will be played in the rebel stronghold of Bouake. And being from the south himself, it was an attempt to bring the nation back together. It was very successful at the time, with a 5-0 victory against Madagascar, capped by Drogba scoring the final goal to cause celebrations across the whole country. So this is not to say this brought enduring peace. There's been more conflicts and schisms since then in Cote d'Ivoire. But think about the power of this moment, right? This World Cup qualifier in which Drogba and the team got on their knees and begged their country to come together, and the impact that they had. That is far more important than their actual performance at the World Cup, which we can now talk about now. So Ivory lost its first 2 Group C matches. Ivory Coast lost its first two group matches to Argentina. 1-2 to Argentina and 1-2 to the Netherlands. Then coming back from 2-0 down against Serbia and Montenegro, winning 3-2. Right? In Group D, Angola, which was the only African team with a local coach, Luis Oliveira Gonçalves, lost their first match 1-0, right, to Portugal. That's their former colonial masters. Drew 0-0 with Mexico and 1-1 with Iran. So they didn't make it to the second round, but they comported themselves well. In Group G, Togo actually made more news off the pitch with disputes about team bonuses, right, harkening back to Zaire some time ago, which caused the coach Otto Pfister to walk out on the team just before the first match, and he eventually came back. And Togo ended up losing 1-2 to South Korea, 2-0 to Switzerland, and also 2-0 to France. So they lost all 3 games. Tunisia, remember that what I was talking about how their scorelines are so typical? And they're always in like Group H or Group G for some reason. 2-2. Tunisia drew 2-2 with Saudi Arabia, lost 3-1 to Spain, and 1-0 to Ukraine. So 2 draws and 2 losses and a draw. Sounds about Tunisia. Now, the only team to make it to the round of 16 in this World Cup was Ghana, which they began with a 2-0 loss to Italy, who Italy would go on to win, right? Then they went on to beat the Czech Republic 2-0, and then also beat the US 2-1, which starts some pseudo rivalry between Ghana and the US, which will be played out over the next few World Cups, whenever the US can make it. So they qualified to the second round, and makes it the 6th successive time that an African team had made it to the last 16. They lost 3-0 to Brazil in the round of 16. So while for the 6th successive time an African team had made it to the round of 16, Africa remained the only continent outside of Oceania to never have 2 teams reach the round of 16 at the same World Cup. Because in 2002, Asia